April 7, 1945. The chill of dawn clung to the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, and above the restless Pacific, 96 silver aircraft clawed their way toward history. Over 700 miles away, Japan's air defenses prepared for what they thought was impossible. For 3 long years, every Japanese pilot had been assured that no American single-engine fighter could ever reach the home islands. The Pacific Ocean itself was supposed to be their shield. The distances were too vast, the fuel load impossible. Yet that morning, the skies above Tokyo would prove them wrong. The aircraft leading this assault were not the twin-tailed lightnings the Japanese had occasionally seen on desperate long-range sorties. These were faster, sleeker, with shimmering bubble canopies that glinted like liquid mercury in the sunlight. They were the North American P-51D Mustangs, and they had just rewritten the laws of war. The story of that morning had begun weeks earlier, when U.S. Marines stormed ashore on the black volcanic beaches of Iwo Jima. The battle raged for 36 days, costing over 26,000 American casualties and nearly every Japanese defender's life. But while Marines fought from crater to crater, engineers were already eyeing the island's 3 airfields. To the Japanese, Iwo Jima was a fortress. To the Americans, it was a stepping stone, 750 miles closer to Tokyo. By early March, before the island was fully secured, the first P-51 Mustangs of the 15th Fighter Group touched down on Iwo Jima's south field. The air still reeked of sulfur and smoke. Gunfire echoed at night as Japanese soldiers launched suicide attacks from caves. Yet among that hellscape, American airmen dug foxholes beside their new machines, preparing for a mission no one had ever attempted, to fly single-engine fighters all the way from Iwo Jima to Tokyo and back again. A 1,000-mile round trip across nothing but ocean. The aircraft that would make the impossible possible was the P-51D Mustang, powered by the Packard-built Merlin V1650 engine, a 1,695-horsepower masterpiece of engineering. With 2 sleek 110-gallon drop tanks under its wings, its range extended beyond 2,600 miles. This wasn't just a fighter. It was a long-range predator. American industry had perfected the art of turning technology into strategy. Those lightweight aluminum tanks could be discarded before combat, giving the Mustang both reach and agility, a combination Japan simply could not match. The pilots who would fly these missions were young, some with barely 10 hours in the Mustang before arriving on the island. They lived in foxholes and trained under constant artillery threat, learning survival and long-range flying at the same time. Captain Harry Krim Jr., a 23-year-old veteran, later recalled that the island itself felt more dangerous than the enemy. Still, they trained relentlessly, mastering fuel management, compass navigation, and blind flight over the endless Pacific. By early April, 3 full groups, the 15th, 21st, and 506th Fighter Groups, were ready. Over 100 Mustangs waited on Iwo Jima's scorched runways. Their mission: escort B-29 bombers to Tokyo. The night before, pilots gathered in a dimly lit tent as Major James B. Tapp of the 15th Fighter Group laid out maps across a rough wooden table. Tomorrow, he told them, they would make history. The room fell silent. Each pilot calculated fuel burn, memorized weather reports, and faced the reality of an 8-hour mission with no alternate landing sites. If an engine failed, the Pacific would swallow them whole. Dawn broke clear and cold. At 7:45 a.m., the Merlin engines roared to life, shaking the island with their deep mechanical growl. One by one, the Mustangs thundered down the runway and climbed into formation. 96 fighters turned north-northwest toward Japan. For 3 hours, they flew over nothing but ocean. Gauges were watched obsessively: oil pressure, coolant temperature, fuel flow. Every sound felt like the whisper of death. Some pilots imagined engine trouble where none existed. After nearly 3 hours, a faint white peak appeared on the horizon: Mount Fuji. Even from 50 miles away, it loomed majestic and unmistakable. For the pilots of the 7th Fighter Command, it was the sign that they had done the impossible. They had reached Japan, Below, radar stations scrambled to interpret what they were seeing. Single-engine fighters hundreds of miles from any known base. Impossible. Yet the radar returns were clear. Japanese interceptors, mostly Ki-84 Franks and surviving Zeros, scrambled to defend Tokyo. When they climbed into view of the American formation, they saw something terrifying. Nearly 100 B-29 bombers, shielded by an equal number of sleek, high-speed fighters. As the Mustangs approached Tokyo Bay, the pilots reached down and pulled their drop-tank release handles. The empty tanks tumbled away, glittering briefly before vanishing into the sea. Instantly, the Mustangs became lighter, quicker, alive. The Americans had arrived for war. At 11:15 a.m., the two forces met. The skies above Tokyo erupted in chaos. The Mustangs dove in from altitude, firing precise bursts and climbing away before the slower Japanese fighters could react. The P-51s could outrun, outclimb, and outgun anything Japan had left. They refused to turn with the Zeros, using high-speed boom and zoom attacks to devastating effect. Captain Felix Scott later said, "We could decide when to fight, how to fight, and when to leave." Major James B. Tapp became the day's hero, downing 4 enemy aircraft in one mission. His gun camera footage stunned intelligence officers. Perfectly executed strikes where enemy pilots never even had the chance to fire back. Below them, B-29s dropped incendiaries across Tokyo's industrial heart as the Mustangs shredded interceptors and air defenses. In 15 minutes of brutal combat, 21 Japanese fighters fell. 2 Mustangs were lost. When the surviving pilots returned to Iwo Jima after 8 hours in the cockpit, their faces were pale, their hands trembling from exhaustion. But they had done it. They had escorted bombers to Tokyo and back. The impossible was now reality. In the following weeks, Mustangs from Iwo Jima became a constant presence over Japan. They escorted bombers, strafed airfields, and destroyed what remained of Japanese morale. By May, they had downed more than 70 enemy aircraft in combat, and many more on the ground. But the Pacific had its own way of fighting back. On June 1st, 1945, a day pilots would call Black Friday, 148 P-51s took off for Osaka and flew straight into a towering weather front 23,000 feet high. In the blinding clouds, Mustangs collided, spun out, and vanished into the sea. 27 aircraft were lost, none to enemy fire, all to the unforgiving Pacific. By war's end, the Mustangs of Iwo Jima had changed everything. They stripped Japan of its final illusion of safety. No longer could Tokyo hide behind distance. The Pacific, once thought an impenetrable moat, had been crossed by wings of aluminum and courage. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, though no longer flying in combat by then, would later admit that when he heard reports of the Mustangs over Tokyo, he knew the air war was lost. The Americans had mastered both speed and distance. The P-51 Mustang had not only conquered the skies, it had conquered distance itself. And with that, the fate of Imperial Japan was sealed.